Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast for agency owners, hosted by agency veteran and coach Steve Guberman. Agency Bytes is a podcast focused on delivering actionable agency information from agency experts in about 25 minutes. Why 25 minutes? Because who has the attention span for much more these days? And you can squeeze in a listen between meetings with time for a bathroom break or coffee refill before your next meeting.
Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast dedicated to helping creative entrepreneurs thrive. My name is Steve Guberman. I'm from Agency Outsight, and I coach agency owners to build the business of their dreams. Today, my guest is Jason Hennessy. Jason is an entrepreneur, best-selling author, internationally recognized SEO expert, and he's the CEO of Hennessy Digital, an 8-figure agency that's been on the Inc. 5000 list 5 years in a row. Jason's been reverse engineering Google since 2001, and his work has helped grow and sell multiple businesses. He's also a veteran, speaker, and a contributor to outlets like Forbes, Entrepreneur, and Rolling Stone. Jason, thank you so much for joining me.
Steve, it's a pleasure, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, love the small world on how we got in touch and what got you to join us today. Give it kind of the backstory. I mean, you run an 8-figure agency. It's not an overnight thing. Give us a quick kind of backstory on that whole process.
Yeah. Been doing SEO since 2001. Started my first agency in 2008. I sold that in 2015 to my partner, and then took a sabbatical leave and started Hennessy Digital. And so that was started in about 2015, late 2015. And so now we're approaching 10 years in business. We cater mostly to law firms in the United States, mostly a lot of the large law firms that have billboards on the side of the road and are on the TV commercials. Those are, for the most part, like the clients that we service.
Because you can say, hey, stop throwing billboards up that you can't track and understand if they're converting at all. Let's do digital instead, huh?
Yeah, that was the approach that I used to take, right? But then, when you work with some of these larger billboard attorneys, right, and you see, just how building a brand can be in a market and how it really lowers the average cost per client over time. And then there's also a benefit to brand search volume too, where Google gives you extra credit in the algorithm when people are searching for your brand as well. So there's a lot of benefit from kind of building a brand. And so, I support those that are kind of spending money on TV and billboards and stuff like that, as long as they're investing, properly,
Yeah. So was your first agency law firm specific as well?
Yeah, it was. It wasn't like that by design. I mean, in fact, I didn't even want to start an agency. I went and spoke at a DUI lawyer mastermind. A friend invited me to speak to talk about SEO. I knew nothing about it. I got on stage, gave a presentation about how I was able to rank for keywords that were not related to law firms at all. But I was just transparent in teaching them how to do link building and how to write content and how to structure pages. And when I got off that stage, I had probably about 6 or 7 attorneys that were in the audience that approached me and said, "That was awesome. Like I'm paying my SEO guy like $5,000 per month, and I don't think they're doing any of this stuff. Like, do you do consulting or can you help me?" And I'm like, And so I left there with like 7 business cards, and that was kind of like the genesis of my first agency. I left with, I don't know, maybe like 30 grand per month in reoccurring revenue just from one presentation. So.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's a great testimony to speaking in your niche, getting on stage, where your niche lives. Because, lawyers don't want to be writing content. They don't want to be tinkering with SEO. So they're going to hire somebody like you. When you sold your first agency to your partner and took that sabbatical, was there like a non-compete in place? Like, how did that transition into a new agency for you?
Yeah, good question. So the terms of the deal were that I couldn't take any of the current staff that was working at the agency at the time. And so there was an exhibit list that had everybody's names. And I couldn't take any of the clients that the agency was working with at the time. And again, there was another exhibit that listed all the clients. And of course, it was a discounted price that he sold it to me for the right of being able to, compete outside of those exhibits, I guess.
Okay. So then when you
Mhm.
launched Hennessy, was the focus of we're going to kind of double down and do the same thing, law firm?
I mean, yes and no. I actually, it's funny. I still have it here. So I created this book, and it was called it wasn't really a book. It was like more of like a guide. It's called My SEO Blueprint for Lawyers, right? And so
Hmm.
it just kind of talks about what you should be thinking about. It's funny, this is so old that it says you should be in the Yahoo directory and you need to be in DMOS. You know what I mean? Some of the old school
Yeah.
people here probably understand what I'm talking about, right? But so I just said, you know what? I'm going to try a different strategy. I'm going to take this and I'm going to mail this out to 50 lawyers in a market. And the first market was Atlanta. And so I just dropped it in the mail. And from that, there was a nice cover letter too. It said something like, you don't know anything about me, but boy, do I know a lot about you. Here's what I know, right? I know that this is where you actually stand in terms of your market, in terms of the SEO value of your website. At the time, I was using SEMrush, the actual traffic value score that they give you. And I'm like, your website has a value of $2,000 per month. Here's what the top competitors in your market, right? 50,000, 80,000, 120,000. I'd love to be able to come down to your office. I'm local because I was living there at the time, to explain how this all works. And so I mailed that out, physical mail. And I probably got about 4 or 5 responses. From that, I went and met with 3 different law firms, and I signed my first client. And that was at like 15 grand per month, to do SEO for that one client. And I just really doubled down, and I just made that like an amazing case study. Like, I was kind of managing the SEO. I was the account manager, as like a team of one. And then from there, I just leveraged that one case study, to get more clients. And, I followed a very similar strategy. And so even today, I wrote a real book. And so this book is
A
called
real one.
a real book. This book is called Law Firm SEO. And so same thing, I probably mail out 400 or 500 books per month, to
Wow.
ideal clients. We run Facebook campaigns where it's like, hey, just give us your name and information, and if you're a law firm, we'll mail you out this book. No cost to you. You don't have to pay shipping,
Yep.
handling, nothing, right? And so the ROI that we get from that is so valuable. And the reason why I named it Law Firm SEO is because if you go and do a search on Google for Law Firm SEO, you'll notice that there's a bright red book, in one of the knowledge panels there, and I don't have to pay for that, right? And so that
Yeah.
was part of the strategy as well.
You literally wrote the book on law firm SEO.
I
Yeah.
did.
So that
Hmm.
initial strategy to launch Hennessy, great case study. So you sent out 50, got a 10% response rate, met with 3 of those 4 or
Hmm.
5, closed 1. I mean, I'll take those numbers all day long, but the trick was each letter was highly personalized.
It
It was
was.
about their specific digital properties, their specific law firm. It was
Yep.
nothing generic. So you leaned into a market, you leaned into a niche, and you were highly personalized in your delivery system.
That's exactly right. And I didn't have
Love that.
I didn't have a personal brand at the time at all, right? I mean, now it's, 10 years later, right? And so I've really invested in building out my personal brand in that space. So now if people get a message or an email from me, the response rate is a lot higher, right?
Hmm.
But back then, yeah, they didn't know who the heck I was. Mhm.
So fast forward 10 years, you closed that first one. Now you've got God knows how many law firms. Do you feel that that market still has room to dominate? Do you feel like you've got it somewhat saturated? Like, what's your market hold there?
So no, we feel that there's a lot more market share. We're very boutique, I would say, right? Because we're not a $3,000 per month SEO agency. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
That's not
Hmm.
really how we're set up to service clients. In most cases, our minimum is like 8,500 bucks per month. And I posted something on Facebook this morning and LinkedIn about, we've got clients that spend north of $50,000 per month just on SEO, right? And so, so we're pretty selective in kind of who we work with. Not everybody has the budgets to work with us. But we could go into a lot of the other practice areas. Like we mostly cater to personal injury lawyers. But we could easily kind of change the strategy and start to market more for like criminal defense lawyers, bankruptcy lawyers, right? And we've never really tried to tap into those specific practice areas, with going to conferences where bankruptcy lawyers go to. I mean, most of our brand equity is kind of built in the personal injury space.
So your niche within the niche of law firms. You're not even touching the divorce lawyers and all these other ones who
We're
are
not
just adjacent
marketing.
to that micro.
We're not marketing to them, right? But we have a few clients that don't do personal injury, but that's not really who we're trying to market to.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you mentioned kind of your personal brand that you've developed over the past bunch of years. Are on the leadership team, are you the only one who's kind of elevated into thought leadership?
Um, For the most part, yeah, I'm kind of like the face of the brand. I was able to delegate and outsource most of everything that I do in the business. I think that's where a lot of agency owners uh, fail potentially or kind of get stuck is they become their own constraint in their growth. And so I was able to just basically take some of the profit, reinvest it into real good leadership, who then reinvested that profit into good team members. And so now, for the most part, the agency kind of just works without me. I can go travel, I can speak at conferences, I can write books, I can promote the books. And that's kind of where I think my zone of genius is in terms of helping the business. And then sometimes I'll parachute in and I'll look at like, what's the biggest constraint of the business right now, and I'll come in and I'll
Hmm.
really spend some time just trying to dissect that so that we can kind of get past that one constraint and then move to a different constraint.
How long have you been kind of hands off with the agency?
I would say, so my COO has been here and my executive assistant for about 5 years.
Okay.
And so when they both joined, we were probably just under, I don't know, maybe let's just call it like 4 million in top line revenue. Once the COO came in, he brought in a CFO. My assistant took over and was able to relieve me of a lot of duties. And that year we went from 4 million to 8 million in just 1 year, right?
Wow.
And I'm not saying that I was like relieved of all my duties, right? It took time to kind of get
Hmm.
more things off of my plate. It's funny, my executive assistant has two executive assistants that report to her. You know what I mean? So over time, I was trying to figure out how do I make her time more efficient, right? And so from there, just over time, like I think in October or September, October, I took like 35 days and I went to Asia with my wife and my daughter. I spoke at the Ahrefs conference in Singapore. Then I spoke at the conference in Chiang Mai, the big SEO conference. And I really didn't have to work, with the exception of doing those two keynote presentations. And I came back in the business, had more clients than we had when we left, right? So that's kind of like the goal, I guess, in business.
Yeah, I recently was talking with another owner about the same kind of epiphany. Actually, I think it was episode 103 with Greg Hickman. We were talking about taking time away, go on vacation, and it's like, oh, things didn't burn down while I was away. And then the following year, oh, we landed clients while I was away. Like, what a great
Mhm.
feeling to see things grow. So 35 days away from the business is pretty spectacular to be able to do. And a lot of people dream about that, but like, I don't know how to make it happen. And so you kind of outline those steps of start to delegate, get things off your plate. What were some of the
It-
like the tougher things to get off your plate, or the last things to get off your plate?
yeah, because it wasn't always that way, right? There was many times early on when we were like a $2 million agency where I would go to Hawaii with my wife and children, and we'd be out at the pool, and I'd look at the clock, and it's like, oh, it's 1:48. I got to go upstairs and get on my computer because I got to get on a sales call, right? And then take the sales call. I come downstairs for 2 hours, and I'm like, oh, I got to go back upstairs at 4:15 because I got to do a call with a client, and it's just like so many disruptions, right? But during that time, the key here was, I was very profitable, right? My margins were as high as, like, let's just call it 55, 60%, right? At the time,
Wow.
right? So very profitable. And so it's one of those things, right? I'm trading, time for money, right? And so, I quickly realized at the end of that year when I had to write a large check to the government, right? Because when you're profitable, that's what you have to do. And so I thought to myself, I'm like, why did I do that? Why did I waste all my vacations? Like I'd rather defer that profit and put it into real good people that can take a lot of this
Mhm.
stuff off of my plate. And so that's really the journey that I went down for the next couple years, where we brought the profit margin down from like 65%, all the way down at one point to like 7, 8%, right? Where it's really uncomfortable. But those were the years that we were investing in things that you really need to scale, like learning and development team, an HR team, an accounting team, executive leadership team, right? A lot of these people that don't necessarily add to the top line, right? But it's important to scale. And so then we got to the point where we put all the systems and processes in place, and eventually the margin started to go. It went from 9% to 13%. Now I think we're hovering around like 23, 24% margin, right? But it took, that's where people are not, most people are not business owners and can't think that way, right?
Right.
So
What about the numbers during that year of growth where you doubled after you put the COO in place? How did your margins reflect that 100% growth?
yeah, so that was, there was still margins in that period, right? Because we were like putting infrastructure in place to scale, right?
Okay.
And so we also brought in an executive coach to kind of help us get to the next level, like help us get to 10 million in revenue. But yeah, I would say that the margins were not 65%, because even the COO and the CFO, right, were not cheap. I mean, these were very competent people who are still with me today, right? Here we
Hmm.
are 5 years later, they're still with me today. And they've been instrumental in our growth. I wouldn't be here without them. And there's other leaders too, like our VP of People Success, our marketing senior director of marketing, our business, and SEO team leaders, everybody, right? They've all played a role. But eventually the margins, because we were hiring all those people, slowly started to dwindle down to, like I said, like 7, 8%. And it stayed there for a couple of years while we were kind of really ramping things up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a scary place to be, but knowing that you're doing it for the long-term investment of here's the strategy and here's where we're going, and those numbers, to your point, they're 23%, which is super healthy at scale that you're
Mhm.
at. So
Yeah.
being so removed from the day to day, is there any part of what you used to do in hands in the agency that you miss?
The SEO. I mean, like, man, like, that's the funny thing is I love SEO, I love it so much. I own iloveseo.com, right? I bought that,
Oh gosh.
but because that's really what was the passion to kind of start this in the first place, right? I was just like,
Hmm.
it's just a competitive game, and I've played it at like some of the most competitive levels, right? I used to do SEO in the online poker space for a while. Then I got into affiliate marketing for a bit. And now I'm in legal, right? Which is a very competitive space, right?
Hmm.
And so like there's nothing that drives me than like logging into Ahrefs and like studying link patterns of like, some of the most competitive like keywords in our industry and figuring out different strategies to kind of accelerate growth, right? So that's the stuff that I really love. But I knew that if I was doing that all day, like the business isn't really growing. I've got
Right.
to take a different hat and put that hat to the side and maybe wear that hat on the weekends or stuff like that, for fun, but I need to be a CEO, right? If I really want to kind of grow.
I know plenty of CEOs, and I'm not like saying don't do that, don't do this, but I know plenty of CEOs who still will kind of cherry pick. I'll play with this client. I'll jump into this strategy. I'll do this because, like you said, it drives their passion. It's the thing that they love. It's creative. It's the SEO. It's the technical. It's the dev, writing code, whatever. But I don't
Right.
necessarily think that there's pros or cons to it. It's personal choice and how they structure things. And to your
Yeah.
point, you can do it on the weekends for more of a fun thing.
And I do some of that still. So like, when I'm out and about and I'm like speaking at conferences, I'm in Chiang Mai or I'm at Ahrefs, right? I'm meeting like some of the literally world's best SEOs, people from all over the place, from India to Australia, people that are just diehard passionate about this. Some people might be more passionate about like schema markup. Other people might be more passionate about local. Some people might be like extreme gurus in technical SEO, right? And so as I meet some of these people, I build relationships with them. And then what I'll do is I like to call this outsourcing genius. And so like if I find somebody that's just a diehard guru on like schema, right? JSON, LD, whatever, I will engage them to come in and audit one of our clients' websites, right? And the lessons that we learn from that audit, we then will basically test. And then if the tests are successful, then apply that to all of our clients, right? And so that's where I still get to geek out, is because I'm able to kind of see and learn from some of the gurus all over the world based on, the relationships that I'm building. And then our clients benefit from that as well.
That's a really super powerful kind of strategy to bring in somebody who's not on your team. Take a look at what you're doing. How does it impact and revise your process to deliver better results for your clients? Yeah,
Hmm.
there's so many agencies that are, I want to say they're built too much on ego, but they just don't have the foresight, I think, to think outside of their own box of how do we improve? How do we improve? And so bringing somebody from the outside who's geeking out with you is brilliant. I love that. Yeah.
It all starts from middle school when I would have to like look at the kid next to me to get to, to get to be able to pass the class, my friend.
That's amazing. I love that. Very
Uh,
cool.
uh.
What else are you up to outside of geeking out on Hrefs and SEO stuff?
Yeah, I'm a big family guy. I've got 3 children. We do a lot of things as a family. Just this week, we took just an impromptu trip to Disneyland. We live in California, so it was pretty close to do that. We like traveling. I have a studio in Hollywood, California, where I'll record some of my own video content, but then we also lease it out to other content creators. So like we've even had this show, Love Island. They filmed their podcast there. We've had The Bachelor filming podcast there. So like it's actually centrally located in Hollywood, and so we market it to that industry. So it's kind of like a separate kind of a business, if you will, that caters to many different industries. Not just legal, I guess.
Very cool. So thinking about kind of your lane in SEO and in the legal space, from a service delivery standpoint, Hennessy doesn't veer outside of just SEO, pure SEO as well, right? You're not doing digital marketing, email marketing, things like that as well.
We do some. So, like we will design websites, develop websites. We will um, do all of the SEO, right? So, content writing, link
Hmm.
building, technical SEO, some conversion rate optimization. We'll do paid marketing for lawyers. And we're starting to kind of get into a little bit more paid social as well. And that's kind of the extent. Like we don't do like logo design, we don't do email
Right.
marketing. There's so many other things that I guess we could offer. But if I'm not going to be like the greatest at that one thing, I don't want to just kind of water down what our core competency is.
Yeah, it's the quickest way to just drop that profit rate big time.
Hmm.
Yeah. Even the
Yeah.
websites. I mean, there's a lot of SEO shops that are deeply niched in their verticals that are not building websites because so many website processes just are garbage and they're losing profit on it. And so they'd rather let a web shop do it.
So true. Yeah, because that's one of the toughest things about scaling, is develop, because but the thing about it is, like, typically when we get a website, a lot of times we need to kind of go in and kind of rebuild the website anyway,
Yep.
if we really want to implement the strategies that we use at our agency. And so while we're in the process of kind of rebuilding the website anyway, it's like, hey, why don't we just kind of leverage some of the conversion tactics that we know to kind of redesign it, right? So that if we do start driving more traffic, that, the traffic will convert a little bit better, right? Because a lot of times we inherit a website, and in some cases it's not good.
Yeah.
So
In most cases, it's probably not good. And so you're doing an
yeah,
SEO first strategy as opposed to let's make it pretty. And
yeah,
that makes a
exactly.
ton of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to wrap up with a couple random rapid fire questions. So the first is, what's your agency's unofficial team anthem?
Our agency's unofficial team anthem, I would say, we live and die by our culture. So
Mm.
like we really support each other. We got a great culture. Culture would be our anthem.
Do you have an internal culture champion or champions?
We do,
Yeah,
yeah. So we have culture committees,
nice.
and right now we're actually doing something. It's kind of like March Madness, where everybody submits their animal, and then there's brackets, and the whole company votes. It's like a cat versus a rabbit, and the rabbit
Oh, cool.
accelerates, right? And so we do stuff like that. We do Rack Week, Random Acts of Kindness, where we give our staff, like team, time to kind of go and give back to their communities. There was Employee Appreciation Day, I think last week or the week before. We gave everybody half a day to just, with a bonus, to go and just get their nails done, or go get a massage, right? So like we've got a recognition channel in Slack where people are recognizing each other based on one of the core values that they saw them do, right? So it's heavily integrated in the organization.
Love that. That's got to be paramount. What's
Mhm.
something that people would be surprised to learn about you?
That I am a military veteran, was in the Air Force for 4 years, and that I made special forces and I turned it down and I didn't
Wow.
pursue it. Yeah. So I
Wow.
could have been one of the Navy SEALs of the Air Force, I guess, if you will. But at the time, I was enlisting in the Air Force to help pay for college, and I would have had to enlist for another 2 more years. And I'm in boot camp, and I'm like, what did I sign up for? And I was in great shape. I was like a good wrestler in high school as a sports, into sports. And yeah, I made it. And it's funny, they called my mom. The colonel brought me into his office. They celebrated it in my dorm, and I'm just like, I think I'm gonna turn this down. I'm sorry, but anyway, it was all meant to be, because here I am
Mhm.
doing SEO, right? Instead of jumping out of airplanes or protecting the president.
Special
So,
Forces SEO. I love it. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Finally, what's a question that agency owners should be asking more often?
What's the question agency owners should be asking more often? Asking for help, I think. Like you said, I think there's a lot of people that have egos or think that their way is always the best way. It's okay, right? I think we grew up in life having coaches. Like from Little League, you had a baseball coach. In high school, if you played basketball, you had a basketball coach. In college, you were studying for the SAT, you might have had somebody that came in and tutored you on that, right? I mean, but all of a sudden you get out of college and it's like you're on your own and you don't have any more coaches, right? So it's not a bad thing to get somebody to help coach you and to give you cliff notes to get to the next level. And so ask for help.
I love that. I did not pay Jason to say that. So plug for coaches. Yay.
Hmm.
Jason, thank you so much for spending time with me, your experience, what you've built, both from family culture, the businesses. Really appreciate you sharing that with everybody that's listening. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
Thanks again for tuning in to Agency Bytes. If you know someone with expert knowledge on a topic that agency owners would love to hear about, go to agencyoutsight.com/podcast-guest and nominate them.